Good morning, future Earth people. It's Carlos again. This is Scarlet and Sable. If you haven't liked the videos, well, why are you here? But if you haven't liked it, go ahead and hit the like. Let somebody know. Tell a friend. So this week, I think, is what we've been all waiting for, what we've been building to. The promise of 2 months ago maybe will be realized. We're going to be doing the oils. So I'm not going to wait until the middle. I'm going to do it at the beginning. All the old people and all the new people, welcome back. We'll go through how we do oils again one more time, especially for the newer folks. So let's dig in. The thing about when we're doing our oils, we've already done a pin wash. This is going to be our second pass. And this actually isn't going to be the final thing, but I'm not going to spoil it. This isn't going to be the final usage of oils, but we'll get to that when we get to it. So this is going to be one of our major components of our weathering. The oils are going to be serving dual purposes. And before we talk about that, I can talk a little bit about how they're used. So if you see in the background, there is a piece of cardboard, and I have the oils arranged, which I showed a screenshot of if you're interested. And I might not use all those oils. I think I try to. One of the things that I do is I tend to limit my palette because I find that having 16 colors can be a bit overwhelming or more. Heck, even 7 or 8 colors. That can be a lot. I always feel like I need to work each one in. I feel like, Venetian red didn't get its just due, so I'm going to go ahead and try to work it in there. And I do again on this particular model. I just can't master that color. Such an awesome color. So it's on the cardboard. The reason for that is that it's going to take out a little bit of the linseed oil, which is like the carrier or the medium for the oil. That's going to increase the matte quality, or I should say decrease the gloss, and it will also decrease the drying time if we take out that agent. That's just one of those things that I've been doing forever, and I learned from Michael Rinaldi. And I don't know who he learned it from. I have a pot of waste or cleaning thinner back there. That's a mixture of everything that I've used, kind of the leftovers, and also I use some clean strip to kind of add in when it starts to get low. Mineral spirits don't really flash off. They don't evaporate super quick, but you will notice that as you clean off and clean off and clean off, you tend to splash, or you get, you take some mineral spirits out a tiny bit every time with the brush. Added to the evaporation, you will have a little bit of consumption. For blending, we should be using our high quality thinner. I mostly, the lowest grade I use is of course the Home Depot odorless mineral spirits, the clean strip odorless mineral spirits, and that stuff is fine. It will not react with an acrylic base coat. That's the only thing I know for certain. I also know that higher quality artist brands will not activate or affect an acrylic underlayer. So that's the product you should find or should look for, is those high quality acrylic mineral spirits. The thing is though is that sometimes I still end up just washing out the brush and then adding a little bit, not cleaning it or using the good mineral spirits. I just use the bad stuff. It doesn't really seem to affect the outcome, but if you wanted, like if you were painting, for example, you would want to use only clean thinner to maintain like the real bright quality of your colors. But since we're just weathering, it doesn't really matter if we start to desaturate or our colors turn a little grayish. It doesn't really matter, and they're far too bright as it is. Now, see, here's where I once again I try to get too close to the sun, and I try to use that Venetian red. It's an amazing color. I can't ever harness it, and I always try to use it, and yeah, it's a beast. I can't wrap my head around it. It's so powerful, and yet still. I know I can't handle it, and I keep going back for it. I don't know. There it is right there. That's the, I guess, the analogy for my entire modeling experience. You know. So with just a little bit of thinner on the brush, we want to keep the brush mostly damp, and then we'll get a little bit of the color. Now the approved method is you get color with one brush, and then you blend with the second brush. And that'll definitely make things faster. And for a large model like this, it would be much more efficient to have maybe a particular brush for a particular group of colors. And since oils don't necessarily dry, you don't really need to clean them out constantly. But when it comes to blending, you know, sometimes you do want to maintain the purity of that color. So like if I'm going to blend a lighter dust color, I don't want to use the brush that I was just using to, you know, blend my rust. Now, probably most people, or people who are logical and, you know, their lives make sense, what they would do is they would probably go through their colors in a logical progression. They would start with the lighter colors, work towards darker colors, and stay in the same family. So you'd stay in like your ochre or earth family, and then you'd move on to maybe your rust colors. I tend to have a bit of a more scatterbrained vision, as you can see, and I tend to add stuff as I work my way over the model. And I mentioned earlier, one of the things that is what I'm finding to be more helpful in me getting things done is that I'm not focusing on just one area. I used to do that. I would focus on one area and try to get it to like you know, maybe a final completion. The problem is that I would go super crazy in that one particular area, lots of streaks, lots of chipping, lots of dust, lots of this, lots of that. By the end of it, I have no idea what I've done, and not only that, I used up all of my mojo on just that one spot. So I think that, and I'm talking, this is aspirational what I'm saying. I want to get to a place where I'm able to look at the whole model holistically, apply everything, you know, the basics first, and then come back and then add in the super detail. That's kind of where I want to go. I'm still like this on this model. I wanted to move around it, and I mentioned it in the last video and the video before that. But I wanted to continually move around the model and not get stuck in that one little area, because it was vital that I finish this, and it was also vital that I maintained a coherency. You know, this is honestly, I'm not used to working on something this large. I'm usually working on tanks that are a little bit smaller. I've only done one 1/35. I've done a couple. Have I done a couple? I think I've done 2 or 3 1/48ths, and I've done several 1/72. So 1/72 I think is a really good scale for me. The only thing is I hate the tracks, but it's a good scale for me because I'm used to painting very, very small things. So it's not really, for me, it wasn't that big of a leap, even though it's slightly smaller than a Warhammer figure. Well, it's a lot smaller than a Warhammer figure, but it's still, you know, I feel like it translated very more closely to my skill set. Whereas these larger tanks, you kind of have to skew a little bit more towards realism. You have to go a little bit more. I mean, you don't have to, but there's horses for courses, of course. But of course. Anyhow, there's horses for courses, but you know that when you start to use some of these effects on larger scales, it doesn't necessarily have the same sort of impact as it does at smaller scales. So when you're going through, you need to make sure that you keep everything in a balance. So I'm going to let you guys soak some of this in, and then I'll come back in when I have something intelligent to say. So I'd say the number one question that there's an FAQ for me is, do I need to varnish before I use oil paint? The simple answer is no. It's obviously a little more complicated than that, but I can tell you that I have been doing this for about 8-9 years now, and oil paint will not affect an acrylic base coat. It won't affect a lacquer base coat. It can affect an enamel base coat. So again, if you paint your model with acrylic paint, water-based acrylic paint, oil paints will not affect it negatively. Now that's not to say that if you're aggressive with your finish or you use incorrect thinners that you can't run into trouble, but in general, as long as you're using, an oil paint that, you can get at Michael's with a relatively high quality mineral spirit, you'll be fine. Now, where things start to get complicated, and it's kind of a topic that's much larger than this series of videos. Well, I don't know if it's larger, but it's definitely a large topic, and that is like how you finish your models, how you introduce different coatings. Each coating, each type of finish is going to affect it differently. And when I say each type of finish, I mean matte, satin, and gloss. Each one of those has a different effect on your model. They also have a different effect on the finish. So one thing that we need to know is that if we insist on using a clear coat or a varnish, is that oil paint has the easiest time sticking to matte coatings. It has the hardest time sticking to gloss coatings. So what that means is that when you're doing your oil paint rendering or you're doing your washes in general, when you do these techniques over the matte coating, it's going to be more difficult to remove them, and ultimately you're not going to be able to get everything off of the model. You're going to have like slight residual stains, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? We're doing weathering. So that's something to bear in mind. And like, since most hobby paints finish in that kind of zone, they finish in the satin to matte zone, you should be fine right out of the gate. Now, if you are anxious about maybe making a mistake or it's not going to turn out right, oil paint is pretty forgiving. You can always clear it up, even over these matte coatings. But everybody can do their own thing. But just to restate it one more time, you do not have to varnish your model before putting oil paints on them, as long as you use water-based acrylic or lacquers. So, just to expand a little bit on that topic, though, you can play with these different types of finishes. You can give the armor of the Space Marine maybe a shinier finish, maybe a more satin, sheeny finish, as opposed to the tank itself, which is like exposed to the elements, is going to be oxidizing and have all kinds of stuff going on, mud, blood, earth, whatever. explosions, gunpowder. That's going to lead to probably more damage and wearing down of that shiny clear coat finish that they put on it at the factory. So that's just something to think about, something to play with. And on metallics, you can also go for a shinier finish as well. Me personally, like honestly, until I did this model, I really hadn't even messed with those for a long time. I never varnish my models anymore. I'm mostly painting for display purposes, or actually just because I enjoy painting. I don't even do anything with them. I either stick them in a corner, give them to my kids, or just, I don't know, they disappear. So if you are concerned about that kind of thing, you should probably maybe look at videos more focused around that. So you could take what you learn here and then you can add in a little bit of that maybe after the fact. And that's, you know, that's a personal choice again. It's a very personal choice what type of coating a person chooses to put on their miniature. So I guess now is as good a time as any as we can kind of have that conversation about layering again. One of the things to understand is that the more layers that you add, the more depth to your finish that you will get. As long as they're transparent, you will continue to build up those layers. At some point, or maybe somewhere along the journey, you might notice that maybe the same thing, you keep doing something over and over, and maybe you're not seeing any benefit anymore, and then, maybe you finally learn that valuable lesson of when it's time to call it enough. But the thing is that if you go over, like, let's say if you were just talking about oils and you were just layering in one spot or one particular area of the model, you have to give it time to dry, and you also kind of have to understand that, like, eventually you're just gonna get maybe a muddy or a confused look. So it's necessary for a higher quality finish that you have to mix in texture and you have to mix in different effects as well. That's what truly layering, that's when it really starts to happen. So maybe you'll flick some mud or some dirt or some speckle it a little bit, and then you'll go back in with some oils again, and then maybe you'll add a little bit of pigment, and then you'll add in some oil washes because you lost that nice delineation of having the oil wash in that panel line, and on it goes. So, I won't say that it's necessarily an easy thing to get like a super attractive finish. It's not something that I achieve every time. I mean, I have whole shelves full of models that I've tried and failed on various things. So it's important to try a little bit at a time and kind of grow. But just understand that, like, the more you add in, the more layers you create, the more depth you're going to have. One of the things that I think, I'm not sure who I read it. I believe it was Michael Rinaldi, but a lot of times, and you'll see this a lot, if you look at Facebook and you look at people who are maybe even beginners to intermediate, heck, even advanced people, even my models, if you look at it, you might notice that, like, all of the chipping only occurs in one stage. For me, that's definitely true. Or all of the mud occurs only in one stage. And even if it's a well done effect, you're going to get a way more convincing effect if you do it in multiple layers. Now, obviously, time is a factor, and you can't finish every single model to the highest level. But just understand that when you come back and you add in more and more depth and more nuance, you're going to build up the quality of the finish. And how you do that, that's entirely up to you. I understand completely if you don't want to spend 120, 200 hours on one model. This one you definitely could. I didn't. I don't know how much I spent. Gosh, it wasn't 100, but it was probably, I'd say, maybe 40, maybe 50. I put some time into it, and really that's just down to the size of this thing. I mean, I was doing a lot of effects to it, and so it took a lot of time. And I do come back with various layers. I do a lot of layers of streaking. One of the other effects that you can do and Michael Rinaldi uses this to great effect, is you can do what he calls like oil speckling or something. I don't know what he calls it, but pretty much what he does is he gets a very watery consistency of oil paint, and he just kind of flicks it everywhere on the model. No matter where he's at, he just does that. In between stages, in between coats, in between steps. So it doesn't really, I mean, obviously you'd have to be past the painting part, but in the middle of weathering, he'll kind of do that, and it'll sort of add that visual noise, that interest, that it's subtle, but our eye picks it up. So that's one of the things that you can do to add in that kind of interest. With this model, I do a lot of speckling. I do paint speckling. I do pigment speckling. I didn't necessarily do a lot of that oil thinner speckling, but I think I might at some point. It's really that's when you're going that next level, when you're just spending so much time on every single step. So anyhow, just as a thought, try to think about maybe having things occur in different stages of your finish. And obviously this is far easier if it's a smaller model, but I don't think people are coming here just because they want to paint up their they're game miniatures, or I mean, you know, they're run-of-the-mill minis, but maybe they are. And you know, you can use a lot of this stuff on all those things without having to go overboard. The pin wash is very effective. Using pigments is also very effective. The oil rendering, I don't know if you'd want to do that on every single run-of-the-mill mini you had, but you could. You could do like what's called the sludge wash, which you just kind of cover the entire surface and then wipe it away. So something I thought I would bring to your attention is that while I'm using this Tamiya painting pedestal, it's kind of hard to keep your hand steady. So what I do is I use my left hand and I kind of hold my right hand in it like I was like a bipod for a gun. And that's how I keep my hand steady while I'm doing my weathering. So it's a little tip that you can do, especially on these bigger ones that you can't necessarily hold in your hand. But if you hold it in your hand, you can get a solid point of contact with your pinky, keep your hand steady. But if you're just kind of have your hand out in space, if you brace it with your other arm, you can kind of steady down and keep your point where you want it. Well, we're getting close to the end, guys. Thanks again for all the old people, all the new people. I appreciate you guys watching it. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate, all the suggestions. I had a really good time while I was doing this. Um, yeah, so I just wanted to say that. If you haven't already, please like it, please comment, please subscribe. If you have any ideas, again, let me know. I mean, I probably will be taking a break after this series is finished, and you know, I think I want to keep going. Like I've actually enjoyed editing the videos this time around. I mean, early on when I started editing, I'd always get so frustrated because when I first started, I was doing just the videos on the iPhone. And iMovie, you can say what you want about iMovie, but it's very, very noob friendly. I think it's like aimed at children. At least I was able to deal with it. So, when I switched over to this new program, it was every time I came to edit a video, it was like pulling teeth. So, I'm actually starting to learn more about it. I'm having a lot more fun, and I think I would like to do another one. So, this is your chance, guys. I mean, if you made it this far into the video, you've made it this far into the series, this is a time to say, hey, this is something that I would like to see, or maybe, you have other ideas. Um, yeah, nothing really else to add, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.